the healthier the soil is, the healthier your plants are, the more they will thrive and be able to survive adverse temperatures and pests and that sort of thing.
I'm Dalia Colon, and this is The Zest. Citrus, seafood, Spanish flavor, and Southern charm. The Zest celebrates cuisine and community in the Sunshine State. Today, get your home ready for spring cooking, inside and out. Before we jump in, I want to remind you that I'll be at Sarasota Art Museum on Saturday, March 22nd as part of the museum's Quotable Talks speaker series. I'll be sharing some behind-the-scenes stories from this podcast and from my book, The Florida Vegetarian Cookbook. We'll also have some nibbles for us all to share. It'll be a lot of fun, and I would love to meet you. Find details at sarasotaartmuseum.org. Now, spring is upon us, so it's time to tackle all those projects we've been putting off. Maybe you need to organize the garage, file your taxes, or flip the mattress. While you're making that checklist, remember to prep for spring cooking. Things like planting warm weather vegetables, gearing up your grill, and yes, cleaning out the pantry. But resetting for spring does not have to be intimidating. Here to help is Mackensy Lunsford. She's the editor of USA Today's cooking website, Southern Kitchen. She's also a chef, cookbook author, and senior dining reporter at The Tennessean. Mackensy recently spoke with me from her home in Nashville. In our conversation, she shares advice for starting a spring garden, mitigating pests, and planting vegetables that can withstand the South's springtime heat and humidity. She also offers tips for organizing your pantry, embarking on a no-spend month, or at least spending less in order to use up the non-perishables you already have. And she offers tips for making the most of your grill. Finally, Mackensy brings it all together by suggesting meals that will have all your hard work paying off. I want to start with gardening. What makes a great kitchen garden?
Well, I was thinking about that this morning, and I feel like number one, it's mitigating the pests, but that's not exactly an exciting response. So I always think beyond that, it's about planting things that are really versatile, that could maybe work in a salad, but also go well on the grill. I try to focus on things that are expensive at the grocery store, right? I drive myself crazy sometimes trying to plant corn and spend all this time. It's fun, right? It's fun to grow corn, but it's 25 cents a head at the grocery store. So that's one of the things I think maybe you could just buy that.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. So what's an example of something that's expensive at the grocery store that you're planting?
Fun specialty vegetables that are just exciting to look at and hard to find anywhere and maybe grow in different ways. For example, I have a really small garden. I can see downtown Nashville from where I'm sitting right now. And my garden is just teeny tiny. So, but I have a big fence. So I pick things that will grow up the fence. And these two things will grow really well in Florida too. Malabar spinach, which is a subtropical vining leafy green that it's great for heat and humidity. And the other one, they're called a bunch of things: mouse melons, sour gherkins. They basically look like teeny tiny cucumbers or miniature watermelons. And they're itty bitty. They're so neat. Sometimes you see them at farmers markets. They're really the size of grapes, and they will vine everywhere and climb all over the place.
Oh, that's so good, because you don't need a lot of space in your yard if you think about the vertical space. And I do have a fence. And so I'm like, I could actually do that. You talked about heat and humidity. It's just a reality in the South, especially in Florida. What else do we need to know about gardening in the South? Because in a lot of ways, everything is reversed from what we would do up north.
Sure, it has its challenges, but it also has so many great things to recommend it, right? I moved here from the mountains of Western North Carolina, where I lived in basically a temperate rainforest. and it was dark and it was rainy, and I love gardening, but I'd get like 3 tomatoes and they'd all be waterlogged and cracked. And so in the South, especially the further south you go, the longer your growing season is, which is great because you can practically grow year round. But also the bugs live year round because they don't have these big cold snaps to kill them off. Yes, you're dealing with aphids, you're dealing with, weird weather patterns, hot and sunny, and then raining 5 inches in 2 days. So when it rains a lot, you deal with different kinds of pests that come out for that. And also it will split things like tomatoes and waterlog your vegetables.
Oh, okay. I have definitely dealt with aphids and other pests. Is there anything we can do when we're prepping the garden to minimize the pests just running rampant?
That's kind of the perennial question, right? And no pun intended with perennial there. But the thing that I think works the most for me is planting things that work well in the climate in which you're planting them. So to explain that, I got here in Nashville where it's hot and the growing season comes super early, and I started immediately trying to grow things that grew well in the mountains, like English peas, for example. And they would put out fruit for 3 days, and then it would be 90 degrees, and then all the bugs would come out and try to tear the plants down. And I've been told by longtime gardeners that pests will attack a plant that is not feeling well. So the more the plant thrives, the easier it is to protect it and the less it's getting eaten by bugs.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that. What else do we need to do to maximize our garden's chances of being successful? I mean, are there things we can be doing right now in terms of starting seeds, prepping the soil? I have some friends, shout out to Bryce and Ryan. They have been on this podcast. They're an amazing couple. They have a fantastic garden. And Bryce will say things like, it's all about healthy soil. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds amazing, but I don't really know how to do that.
It is about healthy soil, and that's part of what I was getting at. The healthier the plants are, the healthier the soil is, the healthier your plants are, the more they will thrive and be able to survive adverse temperatures and pests and that sort of thing. So I love keeping a compost bin. That is not necessarily feasible in all parts of the country. A lot of people have access to composting services, which is great. And just amending those beds with lots of compost and fresh soil. And I probably should test my soil. I know serious gardeners do all that, but I don't have time for that. I'm kind of a chaotic gardener. I like to kind of throw things out and see what works because it's just, I feel like when people started growing things, we didn't have access to pH test strips and things like that. I also like to take a minimally invasive approach to the soil because it does kind of create its own little ecosystem in there with roots and bugs and things. And I try not to disturb it too much. Just add compost, very lightly toss it in, and make sure everything's clean, but don't be too fussy about it because if you take too long doing stuff like this, you might not enjoy gardening as much. That's my take.
Right. That's a great point. Chaotic Gardener would be a great name for a podcast, a book. I don't know. Just like get that URL right now. Okay. What about people who have no yard? We talked about what you can do with a small yard and maybe with a fence, but what if someone is in an apartment building or a condo? How can they still grow some of their food?
A couple different ways. If you have a patio or a deck, obviously you can put some stuff out there. I have grown things in tall 5-gallon buckets before and just drilled holes in the bottom, fill it with soil. And then there's certain more compact plants that do better in that sort of thing, especially those that don't have a very complex root system, like peppers and determinate tomatoes. So you can just Google, what's small and bushy, it doesn't tangle all over the place. Those work really well. Potted herbs, that sort of thing. The other thing you can do, and this is what I do at home, is grow things on your countertop. I start seeds indoors with a grow light and a little heating pad. but you can keep little things like potted herbs growing in there year round. And of course, there are all sorts of little kits available at gardening shops that you could buy to grow tomatoes hanging upside down in a bucket with the proper lighting and watering and that sort of thing.
Oh, that's great. Okay, are there any mistakes you've seen people make that just make you cringe and you can help us avoid them?
I love that question. I wouldn't say that I cringe over it because really I do kind of, and maybe it's because I have gardening in my DNA, right? I come from farmers a few generations back, and I think that people just overthink it sometimes. I mean, I really do think there's something to be said for just letting go, for just like a packet of seeds is a couple of bucks. Throw it in the ground. If it doesn't grow, fine, get another one. You know, of course, we'd love to all be 100% successful, but that is so much pressure. I mean, at the end of the season, when I have seeds left over and I think there might be some warm weather to come, I go ahead and throw those carrots in the ground and I throw the kale seeds in the ground. And I don't stress myself out or beat myself up if they don't come up.
Oh, that's so good. There's so many life lessons in gardening. Like it's good for the soul. All the cliches are true about gardening. Okay, thank you for that. I want to talk specifically about some more of these spring foods. You've already mentioned a few that I'm definitely going to have to look up later and hopefully get some seeds for. We got to talk about rhubarb. It's not something I really think a lot about, but it does feel very southern. You just say the word rhubarb and I'm picturing like ladies in church hats, you know, at a potluck or something. So what exactly is rhubarb and what are some ways we can enjoy it?
So, rhubarb is a plant that grows not so well where you are. It has a very, very bright pink stalk and leaves that are not safe to eat. And it always makes me wonder who on earth decided that this was going to be something good to eat because it is bitter, it is tart, it does not look right, but it's still a very, very pretty pink color in the stem. And in more temperate climates than where you are, it's one of the, first very nutritious, like meaty, stocky plants to come out, maybe more the mid-late spring. And it comes out at about the same time as strawberries are starting to get ripe and nice. So people usually, often I should say, cook those two things together in a crumble or a pie.
That does sound yummy. Our strawberry season is more like February, March. So again, things are a little different in different growing zones. But then, okay, right. So rhubarb sounds like could be overrated. What are some of your favorite southern spring produce, fruits, veggies, herbs, and how are you enjoying them?
I love just any kind of green that's starting to come out right now. The Asian greens, the kind of hardy greens that are okay with a little bit of frost, a little bit of cold, and peas. Both of those things together are amazing. I love to saute both of them together with butter and a little bit of garlic, a little bit of salt, and that is enough. And also, of course, those earlier greens are great in a salad with maybe a mustard vinaigrette or something like that. Some good fresh goat cheese. Oh my gosh, that all sounds really good. I love the early spring greens.
Might need to have that for lunch today.
Yeah.
Switching gears, we've talked about the garden and the outside. We need to talk about the inside. And to me, this is the less fun aspect of prepping for spring cleaning. I mean, when you say spring cleaning, I think about like being on my hands and knees, cleaning the baseboards, but specifically cleaning the kitchen and the pantry. It can be almost like walking into a haunted house when you reach your arm in the way back of the pantry for the things that may or may not be expired. Can you help us attack spring cleaning without feeling overwhelmed?
I can, because I just did exactly what you're talking about right now. I just did a little pantry makeover, and I have forever looked into that big old pantry downstairs, which was just crammed full of like half empty paint cans and like cat food bags, and thought this is just chaotic, but not in a good way, not like the garden. This is just incredibly chaotic. I cannot find anything, but I thought it felt overwhelming. I thought it would be expensive to organize it, right? Because you've seen some of these containers are just ridiculous. But I just one day was like, I'm done looking at this mess. I'm going to do it. So I went and found the cheapest little baskets and plastic containers that I could find and organized all of my things by, genre. Like, here are all my sugars in this box. Here are all my nuts in this box. Weirdly, I have a seaweed box, but that's just
Wow.
me. The nori and the wakame, and then I guess there's some sushi rice in there, so it all just fits together. But organized everything in little boxes, a snack box so my 9-year-old can grab a snack after school, hung up all of the brooms on the wall with the little clips, and put everything in baskets. And it took me a day. And every time I open it, instead of seeing something, it feels like moths are flying out of it. It's like the sun shines and birds begin singing, because it just feels so organized and so good. I highly recommend doing that in the beginning of the year. And of course, yes, tossing out everything that's expired.
Yeah. And putting it in the baskets will help us see what we actually have, so I don't buy another box of yellow rice, end up throwing away expired food, which then comes with a lot of guilt because nobody likes wasting food. So I love that. And then are there any things that you bought to restock?
No, because I could not believe once I organized it, I had enough stuff in my pantry to last months. And I thought, I'm going to have a buy nothing January and February. And of course, that lasted all of 5 days. But still, I felt that way. I got a vertical can organizer, for example. I didn't think I had many canned goods at all, but turns out I did. And it turns out that I buy a lot of coconut milk every time I go to the store thinking I need some. And they were all just hidden. But it is so nice to be able to walk in and, like you said, see what you have so that you don't waste food, which is also a giant pet peeve for me.
A buy nothing month is not a bad idea, or at least buy nothing canned or buy nothing shelf stable. Maybe buy the fresh things to go along with it. So now that you've done all of this, like, what are some meals that you've discovered that you can make?
I had apparently a bit of a grain hoarding problem. I had farro, I had brown rice, white rice, sushi rice, I had quinoa, I had barley. And so I think we always buy these things thinking that we're going to make something with them, but just staring them in the face and all those nutrients and that really filling, just like wholesome stuff inspired me to make more salads with those grains. Wheat berries, my God, there were so many things in there. But a lot of those kind of heavier, kind of chewier grains are great tossed with Mediterranean flavors and ingredients like fresh herbs, feta cheese, olives, chopped red onion, tomato, that sort of thing. It's such a good lunch to take with you to the office. So you make a big quart of that. So I've been doing that every Sunday, just prepping something really sturdy like that with the grains. And it just feels so good and filling, but it's also really wholesome.
I love those grain salads, and I will make them. You mentioned your 9-year-old. I have an 8-year-old, so I'm at a lot of soccer tournaments, and that's the kind of lunch I'll pack for myself at my kids' sports events. And then the other parents are looking at me with envy because I have this like beautiful fresh salad and they're stuck eating the hot dogs from the concession stand or whatever. Something I've started doing, because I do tend to buy things, like you said, you sort of panic buy coconut milk because you're probably at the store thinking, I don't know if I have coconut milk, and I don't want to get home and find out that I didn't and have to go back because then I'll spend another $100. So I will just take a photo of my pantry, fridge, and freezer, especially before like a vacation or something. So then I can look and see what exactly do we have going on in there. And if it's organized as well as yours, then definitely you would be able to see everything. Okay, any other tips around the pantry before we move on to the grill?
Yeah, I would say a good tip for keeping your pantry nice and clean and bug free is to really check things like flour and older bags of grains and that sort of thing for those little moths that sometimes end up getting in everything. And if you see anything like that in a bag of flour or a bag of grain, just go ahead and dispose of it. It's better than having your whole pantry get those little, those little moths that I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yep. I've had them. And I keep my flour in the fridge, but I've definitely seen it with other grains. Okay. This is all coming together now into this beautiful meal. We have our grains from the pantry. We have some fresh fruits and veggies and herbs from our garden. And then tying it all together would just be to grill something. You started the conversation by saying it's great to have even vegetables that you can throw on the grill. But before we can grill, we have to get ready for grilling season. My grill, I'm afraid to even look under the hood because it's been sitting on the lanai for quite a long time and it's probably got some cobwebs. How can we prep our grills for grilling season?
Unfortunately, the first step is taking the cover off. And I just recently replaced my cover actually after looking at it being kind of shredded, having some holes for quite some time. And I'm also a little bit afraid to peek under the hood because I'm afraid in having a holey cover that I got some water in there, possibly. But it's really important to, peek under that hood, so to speak, and check the different parts for rust and damage that they might have incurred over the winter. And a lot of those parts are replaceable and a lot less expensive than you think. Grills that are rusty and gross, just go ahead and get new ones. I like to do as much of this as possible in advance because it is not a good time to figure out that you have a broken grill when you have 30 people over your house for a cookout, which is why I also check my tools for damage and rust and make sure that I have plenty of backup gas and or bags of coals depending on what kind of grill you're using.
Oh, that's important. Yeah. It does feel kind of intimidating, especially if we're out of the habit of using the grill. So I think I'm going to work on just using the grill more for dinner on a Tuesday or something like that so that it just becomes something I do without thinking about it. Any other tips for grilling season or suggestions for things to throw on the grill?
Both, definitely. I have some great tips for grilling season. I love setting up sort of a prep staging area around my grill once it's nice enough out to do so. So making sure that you have tables where you can put your trays of food, like little staging areas where you can put your tools, a cutting board and a knife, having those sorts of things readily available, or at least a place to put them, is always such a great thing to have just ready so that it is not so intimidating to get grilling, right? It's already set up. All you have to do is bring your prepped food out there. I love having a space to cut so I don't have to run back and forth from the kitchen to the grill. And that way you can have a very relaxed grilling session where you're talking to your friends, you're drinking your wine and you're chopping your garlic or whatever. A good thing to have available near the grill also is a big skillet because they're just so versatile. If you have mushrooms, you can throw them in the skillet with some olive oil and garlic and just make everything right there on the grill top so you're not running around sweating.
Oh, that's so smart. Yeah, there's always somebody grilling who runs into the house and says, "Hey, do you have any foil? Do you have a knife? Do you have a pan?" It's like, oh, we should have thought this through a little more. So that's great. And then what are you actually grilling?
I love grilling sturdy vegetables, but you can grill more than you think you can. But I'll start with the sturdy vegetables. Obviously, corn is great for grilling. I like to soak it right in the husk and then peel back the husk, pull out the corn silk, and then replace the husk with olive oil or butter rubbed around the kernels of the corn and throw it on the grill. And sometimes the husk will catch on fire a little bit, which is kind of fine. It gives it a kind of neat little smoky flavor to it, but just, watch that. Zucchini that is cut into long strips is wonderful grilled, especially if you throw a little bit of pesto or chimichurri on it after it's grilled to give it a little bit of zest, if you will. And
I will.
I know, I'm sorry. I just happen to have these asparagus beans right next to me that I'm going to put in the ground soon. Asparagus beans are also called yard long beans, and they are so good grilled. They get blistery and delicious. So you can toss them with a little bit of Asian flavors afterward to make something just delicious. Okay, but also switching gears, you don't have to have these woody, sturdy vegetables necessarily. I love to grill romaine to make a grilled Caesar salad, which is just it gives it such a nice depth of flavor.
Wow, those are such great suggestions. And even some of the vegetables you mentioned, like zucchini, I don't particularly like zucchini, but the way you described it and the smoky flavor that it would have, I know I would like that. So I would say if there's a vegetable that's not your favorite and you've never tried it grilled, that could open up a lot of doors.
Grilling just lends a layer of flavor to anything. I think people don't think about also you can grill fruit. I grilled last year for the first time, and apparently this is nothing new. People have done this plenty of times, but for me it was new. I grilled watermelon, and it gave it this beautiful umami flavor on the outside and then concentrated the sweetness inside. And I just had it with feta cheese and salt and pepper and on the side of some grilled, I don't remember what it was. It doesn't even matter because all I could think of was the watermelon.
Oh my gosh, that's all I'll be thinking about for the rest of the day. This has been fantastic, and we now see the payoff. So we're doing all this prep work to get our garden ready and mitigate the pests, and then we're cleaning out the pantry and cleaning out the grill. But this is the payoff when you can have grilled watermelon that you're still thinking about a year later. This has been fantastic. Do you have any final tips for us prepping for spring?
I would just say to have fun with it and make sure that things are not overly complicated, especially as you're thinking about starting your garden. Just have fun with it. You don't need to spend a ton of money. You don't need to stress about it. You just need to enjoy it. And if things come out the way that you want them to, then that's a great bonus. If they don't, then try again.
Yep, there's always next year. Mackensy, thank you so much for your time. This has been great, and I got to get to work. Mackensy Lunsford is editor of USA Today's cooking website, Southern Kitchen. She's also a chef, cookbook author, and senior dining reporter at The Tennessean. She shared her recipe for grilled Caesar salad with chimichurri shrimp. Now, this brings together all of that hard work we've been doing to prep for spring. So find that recipe on our website, thezestpodcast.com. I'm Dalia Colon. I produce The Zest with Andrew Lucas and Alexandria Ebron. The Zest is a production of WUSF, copyright 2025, part of the NPR network.